Oh,
So we're here with Alasdair.
that's it.
That's right. Oh, I can speak Scottish now. I would like to ask you for the remainder of the interview, do as outrageous a Scottish accent as possible. If possible, try to be Sean Connery times two.
Sean Connery. Well, that might be a very tall order.
Marvelous.
I feel dreadfully unnatural.
I sense no difference.
All right then. Well, I'll just stick with my own voice and then people can, I don't know. Hopefully this is intelligible for folks.
Right. So you're speaking English, right?
I'm speaking English, yeah, but
I just needed to clear that up. So
I mean, some of the words I say might be Scots rather than English, but yes, I'll be speaking English predominantly.
So is Scots a real language?
That depends on your perspective. I think we like some like European languages that are quite similar to other European languages are considered separate. I had a Danish friend once say that the Norwegians say that Danish is just Norwegian but with a tennis ball in your mouth. So in that sense, Scots and English are similar languages, but different. Some people I think would just say it's a dialect of English, but I don't know. Like I think there's quite a lot of very different words. So you can just about get away with if you just speak English and you speak to someone who is speaking broad Scots, you'll probably be able to understand them. But then again, quite a lot of people who speak English fluently and as their mother language struggle to understand Scottish people speaking English as well. So who knows?
Also depends on how drunk you are.
That's true.
I mean, you can be from Birmingham or you can be from Kent if you're drunk enough.
That's it. That's it. Absolutely.
Because I also remember the controversy where most of Scott's Wikipedia was written by someone who could not.
Yeah, I saw that as well. It's pretty embarrassing for the whole nation of Scotland there, but never mind.
Right. Do you speak Gaelic at all?
I don't. Gaelic is the Irish one. Gaelic is Scots. It's a nuance that, like, well, I mean, it's a nuance that escapes most. I speak very little Gaelic. I didn't grow up in the Highlands and Islands where it's mostly spoken. I have friends who speak Gaelic as their first language and English as their second, but that I think is exceedingly rare now. I've only got enough Gaelic to like say hello, how are you? Not enough to respond to that question. Sorry?
Well, please do say hello, how are you in Gaelic?
Well, it's the evening here, so Fesgur Ma, Kimera how?
That sounds like English to me.
Okay. It's not, and it's spelt very differently.
Right. Are there any other native languages in Scotland besides Gaelic? Stuff, maybe Pictish, or is that just for the very, let's say, linguists?
So the Picts didn't actually have a written language that we know of. They occasionally used Ogham, which is an Irish script, an ancient Irish script, and you see that occasionally on Pictish symbol stones. But a lot of what they've left behind is purely picture based. So you see,
Pictish.
I suppose. Yeah, you see a lot of their what little we know of their culture from these symbol stones that they left behind, from the artifacts that they left, and from like contemporary accounts from like the Romans and stuff. But we don't know anything about their language. I mean, if you translate some of the Ogham that you find on these stones, it doesn't appear to be any like series of letters that make sense as words. Like even if we could yeah, we find it really difficult to interpret what is written there, if anything. So we have the fact that there was maybe some text, but we have no idea what the language was. The Picts got wiped out by, or rather, sort of brought into the I don't know, assimilated into the culture of the Scotia, or the kingdom of Dalriata in Jings. Probably the like 900 AD or something like that. So no, there's no fragments of their language left behind, although some of our place names have like there's a place called Pitlochry. That pit bit at the beginning comes from Pictish, but no, the Scots, Gaelic, and English are the only languages spoken here, as far as I'm aware. Like there are native to the country. Obviously, a lot of Scottish people have other
immigrants and so on.
We have
people who
we have a
decided to
really
learn French
diverse
for some reason.
here. Say again, sorry.
And people who decided to learn French for some reason.
We have Scotland has a long history of alliance with the French. Mostly
I wonder who was that against.
Indeed,
the bloody Welsh, right?
Yeah, because everyone's got a problem with the Welsh, haven't they?
Well, bloody long names.
Oh right. Dear.
Are there any like Norwegian loanwords or some sort of things left over from? I know in the Isles, there was the western part of Scotland had more of Viking history than the eastern one, right?
Well, yeah, I know that the Northern Isles, like Orkney and Shetland, had quite a significant like Nordic influence. I mean, Shetland is closer to Norway than it is to Scotland. As for like,
give it back.
I think a lot of the Shetlanders think that too. But to be honest, I don't know that much about it. It's been a long time since I did archaeology. Right. Norwegian loanwords, I mean, other than like fjord or something like that, not that I'm aware of.
Right. You did mention in another interview that I read that you're a teacher.
I am, yeah.
Are you indoctrinating our children?
No, I'm not. I teach them chemistry, and we talk about with the way the world is. But it's not my place to tell kids how to think. They can come up with what they think for themselves.
Right. So if they find another way to arrange the atoms, it's fine for them.
Something like that.
Right. I do not have any chemistry questions, sadly. I barely remember the table of elements myself. Do you know the table of elements by heart?
I don't know. I have a party trick where I can basically name any element from its symbol or give the symbol of most elements, but I don't know them in order. I've never needed to.
What's the symbol for kryptonite?
Kryptonite is not an element, but krypton is Kr.
Oh. The more you know. Okay. And do you feel like you being a teacher and you being a musician has any common ground?
I mean, part of it is all about like communication, and there's a certain degree of kind of, I think there's a kind of drama to teaching. There's a kind of like narrative, you set up the question of the lesson, like what is it that we want to know about this, and then you kind of take the kids on a journey towards like figuring out what the answer to that question is. And yeah, there's like tension and reveals and stuff like that. So in a sense, there's a kind of drama to teaching in the same way that there is in music. Both of them are disciplines that require skill that you need to practice and get good at. I think that being a teacher and like in essence kind of being on stage for 6 hours a day in front of like the kids means that I find being on the actual stage really quite easy, and vice versa. I don't really get like performance anxiety or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, there's some common ground and a lot of skills that translate well into both. But obviously, you know, I'm not teaching music, so the actual musical skills don't translate all that well. But occasionally, I mean, like I teach chemistry, but I teach other sciences as well, and so understanding sound, understanding the physics of it, understanding materials and electronics and stuff like that can be helpful, and it's nice to like be able to put something that the kids are learning into like a real context that they might want to use. You know, like not every kid is going to be an academic, not every kid is going to go into research, but you know, if they can find something that's interesting to them and then use that in a like a passion that they have, then that's just as good or better as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Because in both of them you kind of have an audience, and
yeah,
you can just info dump, or especially as you're the vocalist and the songwriter, you have what is considered the source, the music that you have to present in a way to the audience. Except
yeah.
that unless you're performing live, when you're in the classroom, you can actually see when they're getting bored.
Well, I mean, part of your job as a front man, right, is to maintain the energy in the crowd. It's like to communicate the feeling of the music in a way that's easily relatable to the crowd. And your job as a teacher is to make whatever you're talking about interesting. So in a way, yeah, okay, so there's this common ground of if you can get excited about what you're doing, if you can really feel it and then communicate that feeling, then you're doing the job well. So yeah, there's some common ground there as well.
Right. So now, how do you feel things were different for Hostile Architecture as compared to your previous record?
Well, the leading up to it was quite different. I mean, with your first record, you have your whole life to make it, and we'd been playing the songs like pretty consistently over a number of shows before we recorded. But for Speak Not, but the process of recording it took a really, really long time. I mean, we recorded the drums one summer and then spent the time between then and the next summer recording guitars and bass at home, which we then took to reamp at the studio the year after, at which point we did the violin and vocals and stuff like that. And the whole process just took forever, which was a pain. It wasn't all that enjoyable. Whereas with Hostile Architecture, we did the whole thing in 2 weeks, which was far more fun. It captured a lot more energy of people working together, but at the same time, we'd done it in the pandemic, so there was no opportunity to rehearse the tracks, and so there was a number of things that we kind of didn't know about the structure of the songs until we were in the studio trying to make them. And so I think some of the spontaneity of that creative process has been transferred through into the record, which I think is really special. It's definitely for me a record that has a lot more energy, has a lot more like drive to it. It feels a lot more honest and raw, and angry. And I think it's a more directly relevant and important record than the first one. Well, I think that what we were saying on Speak Not is very much an important thing to understand about the context in which we find ourselves in the current world. I think that speaking to people's current experiences is a more prescient and well, just more pressing, right? Like the world of now is the one that people are struggling in. So that's it feels more important. And also people seem to like it more, which is, that's nice. I'm glad people like it more because we do too. It's it feels like a much more it's like it's the ideas of the band have crystallized in a way that's more more fully realized.
You're more in line with what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Right. I see that you have the vinyl behind you.
I do, yes. So this is the there's a few people who have yet to like receive copies that they bought a while ago, but they're like Scottish people who wanted to avoid paying postage. So and friends and stuff who live nearby. So they'll be getting their copies at some point soon.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing from the booklet?
Oh, the artwork. I just all of the artwork is mind blowing. I was really blessed to be able to work with my friend Tobias Holmbeck, who did all of the artwork, the layout, all of the design, the font choices, like everything. Because like when I was like coming up with the concept of the record, I had originally considered like doing the cover myself, but I just didn't feel that what I was capable of creating was going to communicate the feeling of the record in the same way that I know his work can. I love all his like poster work, all his graphic design stuff. So yeah, I don't know, like that's maybe a cop-out answer to go kind of all of it. But there's no part of it that doesn't make me go, oh my god. Like if I look into that cover, I can just stare for ages and find all sorts of new things to look at that I haven't seen before. This is one of those amazing things about vinyl really is having artwork that you can really engross yourself in. So that's just a really brilliant thing about having the record on vinyl this time around.
Right. And also the title of the record, Hostile Architecture, obviously bringing to mind the actual hostile architecture, the benches again made specifically against people so they could not sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's ironic that it's in the same year that also, the band Chatpile, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they also released that song about why do people have to live outside.
Yeah.
So
within within 2 weeks, those two albums came out.
Yeah, two of the biggest
crazy.
Music art about homelessness,
and
why we still haven't figured out how to make actual change about it, how to view it empathically.
I think the saying we haven't figured it out is misleading, right? And I think
Chatpile. I'm trying to find the right words for it. You obviously totally know what I'm trying to say, but
I know I absolutely know you're like you know what I mean as well. Like
at least I'm not that person who said we will try to cut homeless people in half.
Yeah. Yes, right. Indeed. God, messy stuff.
Messy stuff.
The answer to homelessness is give people homes. Easy peasy.
Who would have thought?
Mind-blowing stuff.
They need to pull it out by the bootstraps.
Really? Well, if you say so.
Didn't you hear the one about giving a man a fish?
Give a man a fish, and he's all covered in water. Teach a man to be a fish. Anyway, sorry, lost my train of thought.
particularly well. Do people in Scotland understand what Cocteau Twins are singing?
What Cocteau Twins are singing?
Right.
I have never listened to Cocteau Twins, so I don't know.
I'm taking away your Scottish license.
My apologies.
Right. How big of a disaster for Scotland was the Braveheart movie?
I mean, it brought a lot of tourism money in, but it is pretty misleading. I mean, it's. I love a dumb movie. You know, I love a good movie, but I love a dumb movie too. And to me, Braveheart is about as authentically Scottish as Highlander is. And Highlander is a brilliant movie for how bad it is. My particular favorite part of Braveheart is, of course, the Battle of Stirling Bridge, where they forgot to put in a bridge, and that's like the whole. That's the whole point of the battle, is that the bridge is the important bit. Anyway, I don't think it was a disaster for Scotland at all, but it's misleading on the history front, and I think a lot of American people who believe that they're Scottish because their great 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 grandfather was, think they know more about Scottish culture as a result of having seen Braveheart, and they really connect to something in it. So, in that sense, maybe it's damaged us, but who cares? It's fantasy. I love a good fantasy movie.
Right. So when was the last time you were shouting freedom while drunk? Or the last time you and your lads showed your ass to the English?
I when would I have last? I mean, I saw Eternal Champion playing this year. I can't remember when exactly, but they were on tour in the UK, and they've got a song called "The Last King of Pickdom," and that was a moment where I felt, man, these American guys singing about Scotland make me really proud to be Scottish. But that's always funny. And then obviously there's still a lot of chat surrounding Scottish independence at the moment in Scotland, because there's a new referendum on the horizon. So I don't know, maybe it won't be that long at all before I'm drunkenly shouting freedom at people again.
Right. I see that you haven't put on your face paint yet.
I have experience of covering my face in blue face paint. I used to be in a folk metal band when I was a teenager, and I'll tell you now, like, it's really hard to get it off, that blue paint. You can scrub and you can scrub, but you'll still see the wee blue bits in your pores even after you've been at it for half an hour or more in the shower. So I'm going to avoid the blue paint. I'll maybe stick to maybe I'll stick to camo colors next time or something like that.
Perhaps. So I hear a cat somewhere around here.
I've seen your cat go by in the background.
Right.
It's a wonderful addition.
Wonderful addition. So we were talking about folk metal.
Yes.
What's your favorite folk metal album?
Oh, that's really hard. So I loved Sagas by Equilibrium. That was one of my big ones. I thought that was an absolutely brilliant album. But I think really the one that's coming to my mind is Turasas's The Varangian Way. That's a really astounding record. I mean, it's almost more a prog album in scope than a folk metal album. Yeah, I love that record. It's still really special, even though a lot of folk metal is pretty terrible. That one's brilliant. Oh, and do Moon Sorrow count as folk metal? Would we say?
Kind of. Yeah.
That like As Shadows We Wander in the Land of the Dead, that album, whatever it is in Finnish, that album's brilliant. I have a lot of love for that. Something like that. So yeah, so Turasas or Moon Sorrow probably, but I don't really listen to it very much anymore. But occasionally there's a wee inclination to go back to it.
Yeah, you have to listen to folk metal and then whip yourself. No romanticizing the past.
That's it. It's very important. Right. To the self-flagellation. That's the most important part.
So how is the ethical way of making a folk metal album? Because you've had the discussion before about how folk metal can lead to romanticizing the past, which can lead to a way to view the present as more decadent, and then having the political implications of that. So
exactly, yeah.
How can you avoid that while making folk metal?
Like, I think the important part is not to dwell on like how brilliant it was in the past. Like it's about the glorification, I think, the creation of the mythic past that it is concerning with folk metal. And I think with the Varangian way, I think it's particularly effective because it doesn't do any. It's not saying that there's anything necessarily great about what's going on. It's a heroic tale, but it's kind of not that dissimilar from, like, again, a fantasy story or something like that. And it's clear that the views of what's going on within the story are the views of the characters within the story, and it's not necessarily the perspective of the band, which I think is quite an important component of that.
Which is quite part of the reason why Sabaton can get away with making a song like Thousand Years of Evil or something like that, or Angel of Death from Slayer.
Well, I mean, Slayer can get away with pretty much anything because of their music style and place in history. I think Sabaton actually have they really do
romanticize it a bit too much.
They don't do a good job of presenting the horrors of war. Like even songs about like Passchendaele or like, you know, Gallipoli or like any of the really awful conflicts, even the Holocaust, right? They're still power metal bangers, you know, like they're still writing like
many people have died.
Yeah, like it's not. I get being into military history. I get thinking that war is cool, but I kind of stopped doing that when I left my teenage years. And I don't know, maybe they just make music for teenagers, and that's fine. But it's not very critical, and I don't listen to them anymore as a result.
Good. Their new albums are bad.
I haven't listened to them. I don't think I've listened to them since Coat of Arms. So there you go.
Yeah, specifically because the last two ones were about World War One, and you really don't get the feeling of World War One from them, because World War One was such a paradigm shift in European history in seeing war as no longer glorious, seeing how many people died for a kilometer.
Exactly. And they've got that song Price of a Mile, right? And it's like it's catchy and fun, and it's like, guys, what are you trying to express here?
Yeah, comparatively, for Price of a Mile, you do get a bit of the feeling. For these ones, I haven't gotten any of that.
Right, okay.
Right. Well, enough about Sabaton
that's very sad.
Enough about Sabaton then, because Ward has generally, and medieval history and ancient history, life in those times kind of sucked.
It did.
Right. I mean, in current times, we do have a bit of I'd say, a monopoly. The Holocaust has a monopoly on how terrible things have were. Then you read things from like back in history where the some Mongol horde was building a pyramid of skulls, or when they said that if you surrender, there will be no bloodshed, and that they buried them alive, so there wouldn't be any bloodshed.
Pretty hardcore stuff
Yeah.
from those Mongols.
Mm, uh, I am trying to make a point here. I just forgot what it was.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned a couple of awful atrocities, and I don't know where you're going.
Atrocities, man. Don't you like atrocities?
Personally, I would I've never enjoyed Atrocities.
Not a big fan.
Not a big fan. Not my thing.
Right. Uh, because like a lot of folk metal, like I said, has this glorious angle or romanticizing of history. It doesn't really look at this side of because these were really grand events. Like I said, the raising. You also had a lot of not just horde invasions, especially in this part of Eastern Europe. I recently, for example, read Taras Bulba by Gogol, which had a lot of thing. It happens in the Cossacks area. It's especially hateful against Poles and Jews.
Right. Yeah.
So you can tell that a lot of this history of hate and death has been going on for quite a while.
Yeah. A lot of these biases and these a lot of this hate is generational, right? It's inherited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, for example, how could you, for example, as a peasant living in the 13th century, feel like saying, you know, the Mongols, they might actually be good people after they raise your village?
I I'm not sure if I was a peasant in the 13th century, I would have been equipped to have that kind of to extend that kind of empathy to the people who just raised my village to the ground. I think odds are, if I was living in a village in the 13th century and then it was destroyed, I would have very little chance of survival. So my opinion on the matter would probably not be all that important.
Well, you probably wouldn't write a folk metal album about it.
I probably wouldn't, because I wouldn't know what a guitar was for a start. So there's that.
But suppose
or rather,
you do find your way to the nearest inn, and you have a fiddle. What kind of folk song are you writing?
Probably a sad one. Probably one that goes, "I'm very sad because my village was burned down, and that's bad."
Now, is there any folk metal that you think takes the folk from that song?
The closest I think you get is like Primordial, probably. The issue, of course, being that like the I think one of the really amazing things about Primordial's music is how well it captures this sense of melancholy and the suffering that the Irish people have gone through, particularly. And when I was originally listening to Primordial, I sort of naturally extended that understanding of suffering to like other like oppressed peoples around the world. And that just kind of made sense to me, and it felt like the music and the intention of the band was to create these tales, to express these feelings, and for it to be like kind of for there to be solidarity there with other oppressed peoples. But it doesn't feel like, based on like reading the writings of Alan Averill and like listening to some of the things he's talked about, it doesn't seem that that's the goal. It seems to be specifically about the experience of the Irish people, which is, you know, understandable. It's Irish music, but it does feel that like a lot of that feeling that of solidarity that I felt listening to the music originally is absent from it, which is a real shame, because it's really powerful music. And it's undermined for me by the politics of the people who are creating it. But I don't think that's an unusual place to come from when discussing Primordial's music, especially on the left.
Right. We have less than a minute left from the Zoom meeting, so maybe yes. I can try to create a new one because you said you had an hour.
Yes, that's totally fine.
Right. So then we'll break it off here and do another one real soon.
Brilliant. See you in a second.
Right. We're trying to beat the system again. The system slightly beat us the previous time. But now we're talking about strategy games.
Yes.
Precisely. So tell us, how do you ethically colonize?
You don't. There's no way to ethically colonize. Like, colonization is a response to the need to grow. So like, if you believe that a society can only progress by expanding and by consuming resources in the capitalist mode of production, then colonization is the sort of natural end point. And imperialism is, you know, the highest form of capitalism. But that is not it's not an ethical thing to do, because necessarily in order to like, if you're taking resources from other people, you are, you know, taking away their resources, and they're not going to be pleased with that. The like means are there for everybody to succeed and live healthy, fulfilled lives. Progress should not come at the expense of human life, or the price to be paid shouldn't be suffering. There is no justification that I can see for colonizing a place that is already inhabited by, you know, sentient human beings, or I suppose any other beings for that matter. Space is another matter. If we want to colonize Mars, sure, whatever. Like, just so long as, you know, it's not just, so long as it doesn't end up in private hands, so long as Mars belongs to everybody.
Right. I wouldn't want Mars belonging to nuclear blast.
Fair enough. Or any private company, indeed.
Let's just say is this mindset would not get you far in strategy games.
No, but strategy games are about winning, and it's about defeating your enemies, seeing them driven before you, and hearing the lamentations of their women. Which I, as much as I love Arnold Schwarzenegger and sword and sorcery as a genre, I don't think is a good way to run the world. So yes, I'm quite happy being bad at strategy games, but perhaps maybe a little better at trying to meet the needs of my fellow human being.
Right. So maybe the biggest point that I could try to get here is, how do you see history as having gone differently in a better way?
Ooh. That's a really good question. I mean, like, no one knows what would have happened, you know, like no one can tell what like if you pick any point in history and say like if things had gone differently like this, then you know like maybe things would be different. We were talking about World War One earlier, and I think like you know that crucial moment in the Christmas of 1914 where the sides of both armies um, stopped for a moment and had just a day of sort of mutual understanding and solidarity. Like if that day had rather than like the men just returning to the trenches to kill one another, if that had snowballed into a more of a movement, maybe the world would be a better place. Because in many ways the material conditions were there for the end of capitalism, and you know a lot of people were trying. You know, there was a lot of very strong left wing movement at the time, and maybe things could have gone differently, but I don't know. We can't know. This is the thing. So I try not to dwell too much on it. You know, you can end up in a real black hole with things like that. I was sitting there going, "Oh my god, if only things had been different," but they're not. They are the way they are, and we have to understand our history, but dwelling on it and imagining how different things could be is the sort of thing that fascists do. So like I there's no point like trying to live in the past. Yes, understand it, but don't try and live there. Would be my thoughts on the matter.
Right. Obviously, I can see where you're coming from, but also I'd like to see, because if you can find sort of solutions for the past of things that could have went different in those situations, maybe you can try to apply it to current or future situations. If you can see how worse could have been handled in the past, now you can see a war that is currently happening right on my doorstep because I'm in Romania.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Then you can try to say if this is how things could have related to, let's say, a war between countries 100 years ago compared to war now, how things went versus how things could have went. Then you can say, okay, this is how we should try to push things.
I totally understand that. Like the lessons of history need learned for sure. It's difficult to take a solution that would have worked, you know, for example, in the early 20th century and try to apply it now in the 21st. I mean, like the control over over society and people's lives that the state has is similar but different, right? Like no, there are very few circumstances where we can take a solution for a problem that is 100 years old and then apply it perfectly onto a modern situation. But yeah, I do think there are always lessons we can learn and yeah, and take forward into hopefully making the world a better place.
Right. And also where I can see where you're coming from, I was talking about all those, like I said, the pyramid of skulls and the Holocaust and imperialism. The thing is that some of these still impact the present. For example, the Mongol horde, all the things that they did don't really affect the present that much compared to colonialism, which still has a lot of things today are still deeply rooted in what happened. And we still can do something to unroot some of the damage.
Yeah,
compared
for sure.
to like, yeah, what are you gonna do about the pyramid skulls? Done.
Yes.
Ask Mongolia for reparations.
I think they're having a hard enough time as it is.
Precisely.
But yeah, no, you're quite right. But I think, yeah, what we then do is we understand our history and the history of those with whom we've had interactions, and then bring that understanding into an understanding of the present. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why we wanted to write the first album that we did, was like, here is the context in which we find ourselves. It is important that you understand this context and this history, because this context and this history is deliberately hidden from you, or its impact is minimized. And that's like a particular problem in the UK. I mean, like, just over this weekend, we've seen to what lengths people are willing to go to paint this picture of Great Britain and all of the wonderful things about it, that are completely false and entrenched in this in imperialist, white supremacist thought and ideas. Despite the effect that these things have had on the people who believe in them the most. So that was what we were hoping to achieve. Whether, I mean, it's hardly like a metal album is going to be the thing that breaks the dam, but at least it got people talking a little bit, which is nice.
Right. Speaking of which, condolences for the big loss in your country.
Truly. How will we ever recover?
Well, it kind of sucks being 73 and now having a job.
Well, that was it. I mean, well done, Charles. You've managed to finally, after all those long afternoons at the job center, finally found something. Good for him. Finally, not on the dole.
Right. There were also some jokes about his wife saying, "Sad chicks keep believing."
Oh dear. God, yeah. What a mess. I tried to avoid it, all of it as much as I could, just because it's not really anything that affects me. But and me and a friend were talking about this the other day. The Queen has almost never affected my life in any way, except when her coffin was being driven out of Edinburgh, and it drove right in front of me, which meant I couldn't get home from work. I was stuck behind this like fence because of the hearse, and it was like, this is typical, isn't it? You're just trying to get home, have your dinner, and there's a dead monarch in the way. Classic Tuesday afternoon.
Classic Tuesday. Oh, better a dead monarch than a live one.
Quite so. Quite so. Well put.
So, who do you think is going to win the match in the underworld? Is it going to be Princess Diana, or is it going to be... Is she finally going to have her revenge?
Who knows? I think Diana has been there longer and knows the terrain better. So that means that I think she has a certain situational advantage, and she can always like create an ambush, like take Lizzie unawares. So I think that's where the advantage will lie, knowing the terrain.
Right. What's your favorite James Bond movie?
I don't really like James Bond movies, to be honest.
And pick a least worst one.
My favorite James Bond movie is the music video for Genghis Khan by what's the name of the artist? I forget. But it looks like a James Bond movie, so I'm gonna class it as one Genghis Khan by Mike Snow. There we go. Genghis Khan by Mike Snow is the best James Bond movie.
Perfect. I'll let him know. If you could pick any living director to direct a music video for an Ashenspire song, who would it be and for which song?
I any living director. Any living director. That's really tricky. It's really, really hard. The person that comes to mind is not really a film director. She directs films, but they're not like cinema films. There's a woman called Vex Ashley, who works at a studio called Four Chambers, who makes these incredible pieces of visual art that are hypnotic and striking and like utterly uncompromising in their approach to art. I think it'd be incredible to work with them on a music video. As for which song, I think Plattenbau Persephone Praxis would be a really cool song to put to like really to really craft visuals around. I'd really like to like do something for the Law of Asbestos at some point, but I don't know that that'll ever happen. But it doesn't really matter. Maybe Palimpsest, because it's quite like restrained. It's quite smoky, jazzy, and so I think that might fit really well with if we were scoring one of their films, that would be the one that I would put out. If they were creating visuals for a song, probably Plattenbau Persephone Praxis.
Right. So you're primarily a drummer, right?
I am, yeah.
Do you feel like I sense that your style is a bit jazzy by black metal standards, let's say.
I mean, by black metal standards, sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just
no, it's not just blast beats.
It's not just blast beats. Why?
Because like I like a varied palette of textures, and I think that jazz drumming is really expressive. It really gets across feeling. A lot of black metal is, I think the best black metal really does get across the feeling that they're trying to convey through the drumming. But I think there's a lot of like complex feelings that can't just be expressed through black metal drumming. I think metal drumming as a whole is very limited in what it can express. And the attitude in the metal community towards drumming is not something I connect with. It almost feels like a sport rather than an art form. I'm not interested in playing the fastest blast beats, the most intense like doubles on the kicks. Like I'm more interested in communicating feeling and communicating energy, and like there just aren't metal drummers that are as good as like jazz drummers, jazz fusion drummers. Those guys are just masters of the craft. I could watch a jazz drummer play all day, but I would get really bored watching a metal drummer all day. And then you get wonderful syntheses of the two, like Kenny Grahowski from Imperial Triumphant is a jazz guy playing metal, but oh my god, oh what a player! He's incredible to watch. I could watch him all day. But yeah, like just what you could those extra rhythmic and timbral parts of your palette, your vocabulary as a musician. jazz is just so much more interesting than metal when it comes to that. And then synthesize the two, you have an even broader palette. And yeah, I don't see any reason to limit yourself by style. I like jazz, so I'm going to play a bit of it. I don't have a jazz background. I'm not trained in jazz or anything like that, but I like playing it. And some people come up to me at shows and they say, "You must be a jazz guy from your playing," and I'm like, I'm just playing tight. Like, I'm not playing any like really jazzy stuff. It's maybe that people are used to watching metal drummers, because I'm not a good example of a jazz drummer at all. I really am just a metal drummer, but I like jazz, if that makes sense.
That's a lot of words for I cannot blast fast.
I can blast pretty fast, but what I'm not interested in doing is like at like 300 beats per minute. It's not. It doesn't do anything for me. It's like, ooh, I got 10 BPM faster. All right, cool, good for you, man. I don't care about your music.
Yeah, so it's a sort of weird way of a dick measuring contest.
Say that again, sorry.
It's a weird way of a dick measuring contest.
Well, that kind of feels like it, right? It's like just who can do the most at this thing. And I think I've seen some drummers who were like technically really not great, but they played in a way that communicated what they were feeling. And to me, that's so much more valuable than someone who's technically super tight but plays soullessly. Like punk is really good and really powerful for a reason. It's because like
they cannot play.
That's not the reason. But whether they can play or not, they bring the energy and they bring the feeling. Whereas metal drumming seems to be purely about this really obsessive attitude towards speed, precision, technicality. But it leads to like people playing with triggers and with super highly tuned kick drums and everything being like people are playing their kick drums barely at all, just tiny little feather taps, and then triggering it so that you get the sound of a fully hit kick drum. And it's like, you don't know how to play the instrument. Now you're playing your style, and that's fine. Like, technical death metal, brutal death metal calls for that style of drumming, which is totally fine. And I'm not going to dunk on that, but it's not the same. We're not playing the same instrument. Like, I'm interested in playing the drums themselves. I'm interested in getting a good tone out of them and have it like feeling what it is, what the tension of the kick under my feet, working with it. Whereas like, yeah, sure, you can like turn the spring tension on your pedals all the way up, make your kick drum really tight and then trigger it. But we are fundamentally trying to do different things. And so I just don't connect with that approach to the instrument.
Mm-hmm. So then you already mentioned Kenny from Imperial Triumphant. Mm-hmm. What other metal drummers are you really a fan of, whether they're jazzy or not?
I've really always enjoyed David Gray from Akrokaka. I think he's a really amazing drummer.
So that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I think.
I always just forget the E.
Well, like I may be contradicting myself because he doesn't play with kick drums; he plays with trigger pads. But in terms of like a metal drummer, I really like his playing, and I always really like connected with it. Other drummers in metal that I like.
Lars Ulrich?
No, I don't enjoy Lars Ulrich's drumming. Looking around at my records and seeing if there's anyone. A lot of my favorite drummers are jazz guys, really. Let's see. Is there anyone that I would immediately bring to mind? This is hard. It's actually really hard. As I open my music library, looking for looking for inspiration. David Gray is always a good one for just metal. Johnny King from Conan and Altar of Plagues, like really great drummer. Love watching him play. Brings a lot of energy to the instrument. Shout out to Gaz Hodgson from A Forest of Stars and Deus Vermin, astounding drummer. Jamie St. Murat. Jamie St. Murat from Ulcerate, insane drummer, but also really artistic. And Greg Fox from was
in Liturgy,
and then was in XI. Like he did that project XI with Colin Stetson. Oh my god, Greg Fox is an astounding drummer. He would be probably my number one, which is, it's terrible that I forgot like him there, but yeah, it came to mind.
Imagine all the others you forgot.
Imagine all of them. But yeah, basically people who are like really creative, and people who are going beyond to like broaden the range of what can be expected from a metal record, while also being, really tight, but really expressive, is what I like in drumming.
Right. Okay. So what about jazz drummers?
Well, Larnell Lewis. Larnell Lewis is an amazing drummer. He's a total joy, and Sputsy Wright, both guys from Snarky Puppy. They're really incredible drummers. Billy Cobham from the Mahavishnu Orchestra, like incredible drummer as well. Let's see. Annika Nilles, who's like a German sort of jazz, fusion, funk, prog, instrumental drummer, like is really incredible. She's a pretty special drummer. I'm gonna stick with those guys. I think they're all like really inspiring to watch play. And there's a lot of these drummers who I watch, and just from observing how they play makes me a better drummer. Like I've adjusted the way I grip my sticks, the way I tilt my snare, where I put my the cymbals around the kit, like just based on like, okay, why have these guys done this? What does it help them do? Studying those guys makes me a better drummer. So yeah, I'll stick with them.
All right. So outside of metal and jazz, what other kinds of drumming genre-wise do you think are worth looking into? So, for example, obviously, prog rock, which is close to jazz in a way.
Yeah, of course.
You already mentioned Mahavishnu Orchestra, which is at the border between jazz fusion and prog rock.
And obviously, like Neil Peart is, is mandatory drumming masterclass there. I think something that metal drummers in particular should pay attention to is hardcore, because like the hardcore guys are really good at not just playing fast, but playing really hard and playing with a lot of intention and a lot of power that I think is really missing from a lot of metal drummers. They can blast and they can blast fast, but these hardcore guys can blast hard, and you really feel it in there. So hardcore for sure. Name? Say again, sorry?
Care to drop a name?
I think we've got some pals in a band called Caligram who just hit so hard, That I just, what a band. I love watching them play. Then Incisions from Manchester, really brilliant. Really hit the drums really hard.
Curious how they're all British.
I like British hardcore. A lot of the best metal is actually made by hardcore guys. Like I mentioned in Eternal Champion earlier. A lot of them are hardcore guys. Power Trip, hardcore guys doing thrash and just blowing the competition away. Yeah, awesome stuff. Converge are obviously another really amazing band that like hit hard, take no prisoners. I think apart from that, like drummers should pay attention to like funk. Funk, it has like just, I mean, what they're doing isn't usually all that technical necessarily, and it's not complex. We might say there's not a lot of different time signatures or anything like that, but the precision, the intentionality with which they play is just, it's like nothing else. Anyone who's playing at a professional level in like funk is a master of the instrument. Yeah, pay attention to funk is what I'd say.
Is there any British funk band?
Well, actually, you know what? There is one from Scotland. They're fairly new. They're called Tom Maguire and the Brass Holes. And there's a couple of like pals who play in that. The drummer's called Micah Johnson. He's astounding, really, really brilliant drummer. One of the best in the country, I would say. And they're quite deservedly getting a lot of attention and praise. These guys are sort of new jazz rather than necessarily funk, but Corto Alto, also from Glasgow, just some of the greatest like jazz people in the game at the moment, making really mind-blowing music. So, and it's like a mixture of like funk and jazz and trip hop and a bunch of other stuff. And they're amazing. They're really like jaw-droppingly good. Yeah. There are so many amazing musicians in the UK at the moment. It's hard not to be inspired.
Right. So if you could start a side project in a genre that's not metal, which would it be? Like if you had all the time and resources necessary for it.
Well, if I had all the time and resources, I would probably go and study jazz and get really amazing at it. I think Ashenspire is sort of tending in the direction of kind of noise rocky type stuff anyway. So I think, it's going to be something like that. But I would really love to do jazz fusion. I think it would be really, really excellent. Some sort of new jazz proggy thing with like Bad Not Good and kind of maybe like some breakbeaty type influences like Venetian snares, something like that. But I don't know, like to be honest, a lot of like the stuff that I want to make musically ends up in Ashenspire anyway. This is my big outlet. So
a funk song is not out of the picture.
Not strictly, no. Like, I mean, anything could happen. Who knows? It just might not be a very happy funk song. There's one beat on the first album that's actually a modified disco beat, but no one really noticed except me. So that's fine.
All right. So then, if you could choose, because we were talking about jazz guys making metal, hardcore guys making metal, any band in the world to make a metal album?
Well, like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard did that metal album a couple of
Right.
years ago, and it was like properly amazing, like one of the best thrash records there's been in years. But so they're out of the picture. They've already done it. Ooh, who would I get to make a metal record? So I saw this band a couple of years ago in a small jazz bar in Glasgow, and they're called Aku with an exclamation mark on the end. Aku, and they were doing a tribute to Sun Ra, the famous like jazz composer mastermind, and some of the stuff they were making. And this was in a small jazz bar. It was so harsh and so intense. They don't have a guitar player or a bass player. It's like, if I remember right, it's sax and trombone and drums. Now, if I could like get them to work with some other guys and make a metal record, I think that would be pretty amazing, pretty astounding, because they've got the skills, they've got the ears to hear it, and I think it would sound like nothing else in the world. So yeah, maybe them, or yeah, I think that would be it. I would go for Aku, because I'm just desperate to hear them do something that's more like aggressive and nasty again. Because they're still making music, which is awesome, really, really awesome music. But that Sun Ra set was like, oh my god, and I just want to see more of that, but like nastier, more disgusting. So yeah, that's what I'd pick.
Right. So it seems like our time is running out again. And I don't think it's worth tricking it again, because you might have some other stuff to do. So final question. In the music, the black metal that I sensed felt a bit more like the very late 90s kind of stuff, where it was already breaching into avant-garde, like Vedbones and Arturus and In the Woods and so on. How much of that was just me looking too much into it?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people are hearing those influences. Like I think I'm more influenced by the bands that were influenced by them. So like for
Forest of
example,
Stars.
like a Forest of Stars, like Virus, who
Mm-hmm.
came after Vedbo and Zenda, and like the evolution of that tendency. To be honest, I don't have that strong a relationship with black metal at all. My first love with black metal is post black metal, is the stuff,
Like
definitionally afterwards.
Altars of Plagues and so on.
Exactly. So it's there, but indirectly, I would say.
All right. So we have less than a minute. Anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you for a lovely conversation. It's been really fun. It's gone to some really wild places, but it's been really fun.
All right. Quick, favorite football team?
My favorite football team is the team that decides to put aside its differences with the opposing team so that they can both score a lot more goals.
All right.